South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow.
I'm Chris McCarthy.
And it's Friday, so on Fridays we've got to break news, right? It's Fridays. On Fridays we break news. After we speak with our friend, New Bedford City Councilor Ian Abreu.
But folks, stick around because I know the news, and Marcus has got a real bombshell for you.
It is. It's big news. Good evening, Ian. Ian?
Gentlemen, are you there?
Yes.
We're here.
Are you there?
How you doing?
It would be nice if I unmuted my phone.
We all have problems like that these days.
Well, we do. Well, when you've got screaming young ones in the background, you always want to be mute until it's go time. So now it's go time. How are you guys?
We're doing great. How are you doing, Councilor Abreu?
Oh, doing well, thank you.
By the way, I know I express the entire audience's sorrow when we say we're sorry your grandmother died.
Thank you very much. You and everyone at the station have been fantastic, and the constituents of the city have been fantastic. And, it was a tough week, especially on my mom and me being an only child, obviously, and trying to be there for my mother, and my stepdad, Patrick, being there for my mother. It's been a difficult week, but with each day we grow stronger and stronger. So, but thank you for your condolences. It means a lot.
You're welcome.
So, Ian, there was some stuff that happened last night. Obviously, you were in a period of bereavement. You weren't able to attend that meeting last night in the city council. But one of the items taken up, the big item, was the rent stabilization ordinance. The rent stabilization ballot question. Now, it was a 9-1 vote. How would you have voted?
It still would have passed, but the vote would have been 9-2.
Okay.
If Mayor Mitchell sends down a veto, if everyone holds the way they voted last night, it'll be then 9-2. I would vote to uphold the veto. I would not vote to override the veto for a whole variety of reasons. I think, and Councilor Abreu is my friend, and I know that his heart is in the right place. It's well intended. But I have a lot of concerns about rent stabilization, or even, where this could be headed here in the city of New Bedford for a whole host of reasons. I think when you look at a non-binding referendum, something like this, first of all, it's non-binding, so it could potentially, in my opinion, mislead folks into thinking that with their vote, they could be essentially lowering their rent, which, even if that were to pass, that would not be the case. I don't believe, in my opinion, that a non-binding referendum is the answer to a complex issue, which requires a multitude of responses that we need as a community to resolve the housing issues. I mean, I'll just name a couple. I mean, let's look at working with our state and federal partners for more robust down payment assistance programs or first-time homebuyer programs. How about here in the city of New Bedford, working to slash red tape as it relates to accessory dwelling units? If you want to add an accessory dwelling unit to your property right now in the city of New Bedford, you have to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals to get a special permit. And we all know sometimes when you go before a zoning board or a planning board or a health board or whatever the case may be, that's a whole new level of bureaucracy and red tape that could jam up a developer or a development. those who really aren't too sure what accessory dwelling units are, just very briefly there, I'll try to put it as plainly as I can. They're secondary suites or units. They're like self-contained apartments or cottages or small residential units that can be added, either attached or detached on someone's property, or a duplex or a single-family home. You can do it in New Bedford, but it's a whole rigmarole of bureaucracy. So I've looked to slash that red tape, and that also comes into the changing of the zoning laws, right, because that's all interwoven. We also need to have a conversation about subsidies under a federal Section 8 housing vouchering program. That needs to be tuned up as well. Look, I'm not interested at this point, unless someone makes a compelling argument to change my opinion. I'm not willing to support a single-line answer to this very complex problem. In my view, just putting out a ballot referendum, I guess it's fine in the sense of get the temperature of the community, but that's a Band-Aid on a surgery that requires you to perform open-heart surgery. And that's not really what I'm looking to do here. I mean, you look at, for example, the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, right? I've seen some articles. I've done my homework on this. When they instituted their city council and mayor signed and ordained, they called it rent control, not rent stabilization, but, 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. Their building permits went down at their building department by 80%. Why is that? Because developers scattered away. They didn't want to develop properties or housing units in those properties, in that community. It chased them away. It chased away economic development. We can see that. I know the Realtor Association of Southeastern Mass, they released a press release.
Yeah, Paul Chase sent that to me
it's
earlier.
a good letter. I read the whole thing, and I thought that Paul, who's a good man, made some really good cases, many of which I just listened to you right now talking about. Another point that he mentioned that's a great point is that this will incentivize, in my opinion, the bad landlords to be even worse landlords, because now they're going to say, you know what, you want to cat me out? That's fine. I'm not going to invest anything into my property now, and we'll let it go into further decay and further ruin. And another point that was mentioned last night, too, I'm not sure if it was on your program or maybe another talk radio program, and I never even thought of this. I believe it was a caller that brought it up on someone's program, and maybe it was with Barry, and said, you know what will happen if this is going to be instituted? These landlords will jack up all their rents now to get ahead of this, and people will be priced out of homes ahead of anything being instituted. So I thought that was an interesting theory I never thought of, but I guess that's always an unintended consequence of something like this. Look, I'm not a fan of big government. We know that. Government is here to assist, and it's here to help when appropriate. I think government should be a convener, a conduit for dialogue, working with the private sector to foster some good ordinances and some policies to look at this program, again, or this initiative. But I'm not sure a single-line ballot referendum is the answer, in my opinion, at this time. Like anything, this is America, and I reserve the right to change my opinion if new data or evidence is produced to me.
Okay. Don't give yourself an escape hatch.
But no, I'm not. But this is, But this is my opinion, and I'm pretty strong with it. But that's how I feel about all this. So it would have been 9-2 if I was there last night. Councilor Abreu knows. He and I spoke about it. We had a repartee about it over the phone the other day.
So, Councilor Abreu, I appreciate your opinion, and I know that Marcus and I will have a lot of conversations about this. We'll probably even end up having debates here in the studio about it as the question comes along. Mm-hmm. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting, and again, I recognize you weren't there because your grandmother had passed away, and I respect that. But there's no language to the question. And this is, as you point out, it's a very complex problem. Even the most simple of solutions is going to be complex if at the risk of contradicting myself. The devil is in the details. How could anyone vote on a question that has no details to it?
And I'm not speaking for Councilor Abreu, and I do have a great deal of respect for him, but I believe he said the point of this was to start the conversation, but we need to have some type of foundation for the conversation. I understand. I guess you could say, he had said, well, rent stabilization is not rent control because rent control caps it at a certain rate. Rent stabilization would be a percentage set of how high you can go based on the real estate market at that point. But I don't know. I just have...
Look, Councilor Burgo doesn't understand the difference. Marcus laid it out the other night. It's marketing. Yeah. It's marketing. It's branding. And I like the councilor quite a bit, but we're not going to break down into an argument or of semantics. Either way, we know what it is. It is an attempt to lower rent and have the government control or stabilize the rate at which the rent can increase. Either way, no matter what you call it, the effect is the same.
And for the record, I don't want to see anyone displaced in the city. And Marcus and Chris, you both know, when I was the president last year, I formed the Affordable Housing and Homeless Affairs Subcommittee, which I named Shane the chair.
Right.
First time the city council and the history of the city charter we've ever had a committee that tackled issues surrounding affordable housing and homeless affairs. So I take this matter very seriously. I don't want anyone displaced, especially our children and our seniors. But this takes all of us coming together, working with the private sector, homeless advocates, housing advocates, Paul Chase, the Realtor Association, the Landlord Association. They all have to have a seat at this table. That's my view anyway, because I got to tell you, I don't have all the answers to solve the problem as it relates to homeless affairs or housing or lack thereof. But you know what I'm good at? I'm good at convening, and I'm good at surrounding myself with people who are better than me in certain sectors than I am. And that's what I would look to do on something like this. And my understanding is there will be community forums. The good councilor said that he wanted to.
So, Councilor Abreu, speaking of convening and discussing with others, what's your thoughts on the fact that Councilor Burgo and his co-conspirators never approached the mayor on this question? Was that a wise decision? What do you make of that?
Anytime I've proposed a motion for which the mayor would have to sign off on or worked on an ordinance or anything like that, me personally, I always gave the mayor a heads up and had a discussion. Now, I know he was asked about it, I think by you, Marcus, and he had said no, but then he said he spoke to someone in his administration. I don't know who that someone is, but, we all have the mayor's cell phone. He has all of our cell phones. He texts. He'll call.
Isn't that like leaving a note? Mom, I'm going out with my friend who you don't really like, but I'm leaving a note because then Mom, I left you a note.
That's the thing, because it seems to be the mindset. It's already a fait accompli that Mayor Mitchell's going to veto this, and I don't know that.
Exactly.
No one knows that. That's a fait accompli.
You can't know that until you ask him. I know. I heard. The council president Morad say that. Well, he's definitely going to be against it. It's like, well, you never asked, so right. I mean, how can you?
Well, that's the thing.
How can you know?
I wouldn't put something up if I thought that it would flunk, unless of course this is just put the ball in the administration's court and see what happens.
But even still, I think a preliminary conversation would have been fruitful. But I actually wanted to ask you about something. I mean, I think we're good on this topic, right? Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you something else that was really equally as important and probably more immediately harmful, and that is Council President Morad's want to repeal the Community Preservation Act funding. And we have that here in Fairhaven. I actually sat on the Community Preservation Committee in Fairhaven for a while. Most towns here in the Commonwealth, most towns in the South Coast have Community Preservation Act and access to those funds. Can you explain why that is a bad idea?
I've supported the Community Preservation Fund every year since it was instituted in fiscal year 16. They've brought forth over almost $8.5 million worth of projects here in the city of New Bedford that are bettering the community as it relates to open space, recreation, community housing, historic resources. I have never cut or voted to amend any of these proposals. The reality is that in 2015, on the ballot, the same year I had gotten elected to the New Bedford City Council, that first election for me to get elected, the populace of New Bedford voted pretty resoundingly in favor of the Community Preservation Act surcharge tax to be put into the to the greater good for the community.
Would you say 2015?
2015, yes.
Okay, so people voted on this in 2015.
A fairly new proposal.
And we're now revisiting it.
So I'll be honest with you. Constituents call me, and I can only speak to me. I can't speak to the other 10 colleagues. They call me all the time about issues, about taxes, about the budget, about sewer, water, infrastructure, you name it.
Get it. Yep.
I have never once, hand to God, received a phone call, an email, a Facebook private message, a social media tag, a tweet, anything.
Ian, speaking to this, just in the interest of time, we have you guys have to allocate the funds after the committee makes the recommendations. To your knowledge, has the city council ever turned down the recommendations of the committee in the couple of years you guys have been doing it? And in particular, I'm wondering if Linda Morat has ever objected to any of these projects that you know.
I didn't believe so. I think last year, the year before, we had one item that it failed. It was the masonry project at the Whaling Museum. I'm dating myself here, but it was to do some work at the Whaling Museum. It had failed. However, because it had failed in committee, I know we're getting technical. We were able to bring it back for another vote. We had one more bite at the apple. We did that, and it passed by a slim majority. So we almost had a failure once, but we did not. I mean, this year is for example, this year the Community Preservation Committee, they're proposing $2 million worth of works that can be infused into this community. And I'm just going to name a couple. I know we're up against the clock, but I mean, crying out loud. The Sergeant Carney Academy Playground for children, a $250,000 project for children of this community.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the Boys and Girls Club, a playground, $47,000. Pine Hill Park, $45,000 for the Interpretive Outlook initiative. And I'm just looking down the list here. More money for the Strand Theater, the Capitol Theater. The Fort Tabor mural for the Military Museum. I mean, we can just go on. And Temple Landing for housing.
There's a bunch of housing initiatives.
There's a bunch of housing.
There's a bunch of housing, and so I think honestly, any counselor that said let's look at rent control ordinances, or let's have a conversation about rent control, and let's have a conversation about repealing free money from the state at the same time for housing, is really got to check their priorities.
And once again proves the point that it's just a cynical political stunt. Rent control thing.
And you look at the breakdown.
Well,
here,
at least
yes,
the person who correct for Linda.
Yes.
Well, for example, you look at the breakdown. It said it was $8.5 million, right? Just about there. Almost half of that, almost $4 million of that, $3.953 million, has been infused into Ward 4. So the Aboriginal Park stuff in the downtown. I mean. And Ward 6 has gotten a lot of love. For example, in my neck of the woods, in Ward 6 in the South End, that beautiful bowling green that I bring my son and daughter on, that I play on, that our seniors play on, that the Youth Opportunities Unlimited kids here at Victory Park, where their offices, where they play on, that would not be there without the Community Preservation Act money. This is important stuff.
The restoration of the George Washington paintings. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff that's going on. And the idea that you're going to rip the whole thing out by its roots is insane.
Free. It's basically free.
But I lowered your taxes, Marcus. Don't worry about the pay raise I gave you.
No. One of the counselors got a bunch of calls from phantom constituents saying that they were upset about $40 being taken out of their tax bill.
But not the $50,000 pay raise.
Not the $50,000 for the dog catcher, though. Hey, so
got a couple more things, I think.
Yeah, so we got a couple more things. One is the I know you wanted to talk about this, the police staffing issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a problem for a long time, and we're dipping close to 200 officers. Marcus, you and I talked about this about 3 weeks ago. It's not getting any better. We're getting poached left and right. We've lost a few more officers this week, and this is why we need to make sure we continue to fund our police. And I appreciate what the mayor did for the recruitment initiative for the new recruits, the $5,000 bonus. That's, as I said on social media when I released the statement, that's only one half of the problem. It's recruitment and retention. What are we doing for these men and women of the rank and file? Of all the public safety departments, but we're concentrating on police right now, that worked all throughout the entire pandemic, that are staying here, that are on the streets, in the community. They need to feel the love, too, because they're going to get poached very shortly, too, if they don't feel the love from us. And and we need to make sure that they're taken care of. It's a big problem. I mean, look at our police officers and what they do. I don't need to give anyone a history lesson about what happened last weekend at the Funzie Trampoline Park. Officers Felix, Marinelli, my good friend Hank Turgeon. If they weren't there, if we didn't have a well-stocked police department, well-trained police department, who knows what would have happened last weekend at Funzie. We had a madman going in there who was obviously looking to wreak havoc on innocent people. And this is why you need to continue to support your police and make sure they're taken care of and they're well-funded.
Ian, one more thing, and we've got a little bit of a tight window here, but before I let you go, I know you're going to be in Florida for the New Bedford week with Phil Paleologos with your Silmo syrup. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, it'll be a great time. I'm happy to be one of the sponsors for the station, for Phil to be down there. I'll be right next to Phil at the Shell Factory in Fort Myers on Tuesday, March 14th. We fly down first thing Sunday morning. We'll be there to sell our syrup to all of these former New Bedfordites who are now living down on the west coast of Florida. I look forward to connecting with a lot of people who knew my grandfather, who knew my parents, and knew a lot of people in the community. And I'd love to hear some more stories about Silmo or even politics. I know, Mayor Lawler and I have become pretty friendly over the last couple of months in setting all this up. So I'd love to trade some stories with him. And, you can always tap into your elders, and especially those who have served in office. So I don't think that I'm not going to use my time with Mayor Lawler as a resource to garner some good policy feedback to bring back to the city.
Ian, thanks so much for joining us.
Gentlemen, have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.
So I want to just break this now because I know there's some notices that are going to be timed out and stuff like that. But the breaking news we wanted to give to you today, and this is a WBSM South Coast Tonight exclusive. You heard it here first and nowhere else. Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima will not seek re-election for Ward 5 this year.
Amazing.
So there will be an open seat. This is the statement he delivered to Chris and me earlier today. Today, I have announced that I will not run for re-election as the Ward 5 City Councilor, and as of now, I plan to serve out my current term, which ends on December 31st, 2023. So Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima will not be seeking re-election for his Ward 5 City Council seat. I think that's major news. You're going to have an open race in a very competitive ward in New Bedford. And we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to react to this breaking news that you heard here first on South Coast Tonight.
Listen to us live.
Can't do it, Sally.
For old time's sake, Tom, can you get me off the hook? Can't do it, Sally. So, Marcus, so that's a big story.
Yeah. So if you're just tuning in, Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima says he is not going to seek re-election.
And he would have been re-elected.
Oh, easily.
Easily re-elected.
Easily. The story is also live on WBSM.com. Ward 5's Lima will not seek re-election. So, breaking news. You heard it here first on South Coast Tonight. That was a WBSM exclusive, and we appreciate Scott giving us the info, the heads up on that.
He's always been very helpful to the show.
He's great.
And to the station.
Yeah, no, he's great because, I'll be talking about something, he'll say, hey, I've got an opinion on this. Can I call in? I'm like, of course you can. You're city councilor. So
as I was preparing for the show, and we talked about the story earlier, I reached out to Scott Lang and mentioned to him. He said he's a good guy. He'll be missed. Mm-hmm. Mark Montigny, same thing. Mark said he's a friend. He'll be missed. In fact, I know Mark. Both of them will be reaching out to him to see what the reasons are. But anyway, he would have been reelected.
Yeah.
He'll be missed as an experienced counselor. A calm voice, I think.
I
think city
so.
Council, right?
And what's interesting about Scott is when
and by the way, he would have been very important to this housing discussion.
He would have, and actually talked about, like, when we were talking about Ash Street, because that's in his ward and all of that. Mm-hmm. They said, there was a lot of discussion about when will what will come of it. And he's like, I really would love to see workforce housing if we're going to get rid of Ash Street. I'd really love to see some workforce housing there. So I think so. I think he's a realtor too. He's got experience in real estate and finance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a real set of skills that will be missing from the council.
I agree.
In this discussion.
I agree.
He'll be there through the end of the year. He's not resigning, folks.
He's not resigning.
Right.
He said he's just finishing out his term.
Right.
He's leaving. I guess you can leave the door open. I guess. I mean, what I will say about his statement, even though it's fairly straightforward, but it's my job to read between the lines.
Right.
Today, I announced that I will not run for re-election as the Ward 5 City Councilor.
Okay.
And as of now, I plan to serve out my current term, which ends on December 31st, 2023. As of now, I plan. So I think there's some precatory language there, right? And so
South Coast audience is rushing to the thesaurus right now.
There's a law school. It was a law school term for the most part. Non-definitive language, we'll say, right? Suggestive. Maybe I will. I plan on doing this.
Right.
So as of now, I plan on doing this. So I think there's some cushion there in his statement to say, well, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that, right? And so, but right now, what we do know, and what he has said definitively, is that he will not run for city council for Ward 5. He will not run. So
Marcus, what does that tell us? Couple things. We know that Ward 5 is the most politically active ward in the city.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, he had an opponent, Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, Zach Boyer,
who stayed active in politics.
Yeah, he worked on Carmen Amaral's campaign. I got to imagine.
I would assume he'll be a candidate, right?
I got to imagine he's going to look at it again. You got Paul Chase, who lives in Ward 5,
right?
Who ran a strong campaign against Scott,
right?
And I mean, a lot. Mayor Mitchell lives in Ward 5.
Scott Lang lives in Ward 5.
Scott Lang lives in Ward 5.
There's very few open seats. Right?
Yeah,
few and far between.
It's a rare opportunity, and it happens to... It's kind of funny, actually. This happened last time in 2017. There was a Ward 3 special election, and then the Ward 5 seat opened up when Kerry Winterson decided not to seek re-election.
That's very interesting, right?
Isn't it? So it's a cycle.
You have...
But still, that was 6 years ago.
Former Ward 6 Councilor Joe Lopes recently moved to Ward 5.
That's interesting.
There's that. There is... other people who are looking at maybe running at large that we've heard who live in Ward 5.
So for people who don't know, the area that Councilor Lima represents is the neighborhoods around Buttonwood Park.
Right. The most heavily, those two precincts that vote at the Buttonwood Warming House have the highest percentage turnout in the whole city.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people. The Ward 5 Democrat Committee is very active. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of politically minded people, civically minded, I would say, in that area. It's going to be a competitive election.
It's going to be a very competitive election, and it's now with the backdrop of all this stuff going on. Linda Morad wants to kill the CPC money, and now they're asking whether or not you support rent control.
Right.
And I'm kind of at this point now where I don't agree with you on the principle of rent control being a doomed policy.
Okay.
But what I would say is the non-binding resolution strikes me now as less of a good idea as it was yesterday in light of this now CPC thing. Because listen,
go ahead.
I know that Shane wants this.
Totally agree with you.
And he has the power to start working on it. And I understand I can kind of sympathize with, well, let's see if they want it first. But I think you're elected for a specific reason. You have the mandate just by virtue of your election to start working on stuff. Do it.
That's the only reason that you have any, right?
Yeah.
And it is a complex issue with all kinds of intended and unintended consequences. As Councilor Abreu said today, unintended consequences. I was happy to hear him say that on Tim Weisberg's show. It is not the type of thing the general public, and I'm not insulting the general public, but is equipped to make a decision on. It's why I don't like in complex ballot measures. This is going to require a lot of study, a lot of experts, a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Things the general public doesn't have. The reason you elect representatives.
Yeah.
So, Councilor Abreu, to put forward a vague proposal of would you like lower rent No kidding.
Well, that's what's
going to pass.
That's what's kind of bothering me now about the Community Preservation Act, because the language that's on it is intentionally, I think, obfuscating.
I would agree.
And to say, oh well, that's the way it was on the ballot last time. Okay, maybe it was. That doesn't mean you have to put it on the ballot the exact same way, first of all.
Correct. Second
of all, did you ask the city council attorney, David Jaratowski, is this the way I have to put it on the ballot, or is this the way I can put it on the ballot?
Right.
I think it's the latter, honestly, because I think it's intentionally obfuscating, and I think it's suspicious. It's incredibly suspicious that only one city councilor happens to get this deluge of calls. Everybody's calling me all the time, telling me what a horrible thing it is that I have to pay $40 out of my taxes.
And, Marcus, this has been around for a number of years.
Yeah, 20, 30 years.
I have not heard any serious opposition to the projects by Linda Morad.
Zach Boyer will run for city council.
Oh, excellent. First
breaking
candidate.
here. Yeah.
Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Well, actually, Marcus, give him a full breaking news.
I will. Breaking news. Yeah. Zach Boyer will run for Ward 5 city council.
Former candidate, Zach Boyer.
Former candidate, Zach Boyer, yeah. It's going to be a whole different race now with an open seat, though.
Totally
entirely different race, entirely, because now you're saying this is why I'm the best candidate, not this is why Scott Lima was bad.
Correct.
That was the argument he had to make last time, which you couldn't make because he was doing a good job.
Right. Right.
So, and
I would assume Mr. Boyer has learned a lot of lessons, as you always do.
It's always a dry run, yeah.
Right. He said, he probably realized I got to start earlier, as he just did.
Yeah.
Right? He started as early as anybody could.
Yeah.
And probably realizes, wow, I've got to make sure I knock on more doors. I got to dedicate more time to knocking on doors than I thought I needed to last time. A lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
I'm really excited. It's a highly competitive, I think,
and
neighborhood.
while I disagree with Mr. Boyer, I think on a lot of things, I'm excited that he's coming back because that's the right thing.
Yeah, I think having people like Zach in is going to bring in issues that I think are really important to discuss, and so I'm really looking forward to that.
So, Marcus, just to get back on the discussion of the CPA, the fact that Linda Morad has had the power to allocate the funds and discuss them, and has never, as far as we know, put up any kind of resistance to the projects.
Yeah.
Now is saying, let's not do the hard work of resisting individual projects that we don't think deserve funding. Let's just rip the whole damn thing out.
Yeah, and it's because I've been hearing from everybody everywhere all at once that they're telling, but then at the same time, my colleagues haven't heard enough from their constituents to want to move forward with this.
Right.
And I will say about this in terms of so I changed it to non-binding. It's the same thing. It's just going to take longer because one, I think the language is intentionally obfuscating. And two, you have the highest ranking member of the city council outright lying about the benefits of the program. She did lie about it today. She said, oh, well, it was great when all that money was coming in from the state. Less money's coming in now. Okay, well, there's a 35% match from the state from the funds. But she knows, because she's in finance and she's been around for a long time, that it's not just the money from the state that you get. It's the leveraged funds total. So if you look at the Mass Cultural Council or other larger NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and they look at, well, one of the things that you need is community investment to get grant money, they're going to look at to see whether you got CPC money.
And so for you folks at home, Marcus was on the CPC committee in Fairhaven.
I was.
So
yes.
he knows. He's got a bit of expertise.
Yeah,
here.
So I was the historical commission rep for the CPC for a while, and then I was the BPW rep for the CPC, and I had to leave because frankly I did the show, right? So, but and they meet at 7, but we funded a lot of good projects when I was there. The Whitfield Manjaro House, we fixing up, and it's not just this is so pretty nice and all that, which I think there's a benefit to.
Certainly.
But we fix the concrete at the skate park, right? Things that are necessary.
And Marcus, the other thing, going to, and you made this point earlier, but again, it cannot be stressed enough. The idea that you're going to say we're going to implement a rent control or rent stabilization scheme in the city, but at the same time, I want to rip out the source of money for affordable housing projects.
Yeah.
Is insanity.
It's crazy.
I mean, look, the money that is being allocated from the CPC funds is going directly into constructing new units of housing.
Yes.
Not some scheme by which we get the landlords to pay less, to charge less rent, which, no. Today, they are funding and have been funding additional units of housing in the city of New Bedford. Real created housing, okay?
Yeah.
And she wants to rip that out.
Yeah.
To put
I know.
up a scheme by which she seizes people's property.
I think all of this is just a flurry of distractions from bad press, frankly.
It is the most cynical propositions I have ever seen, Marcus. They contradict each other. You have one program that is literally funding housing in the city of New Bedford. And at the same time, you have a scheme by which you're saying, well, we don't have enough housing, so we're going to put rent control in.
Yeah, it does. It just you're undermining your argument. There's no ideological consistency here.
Because what she wants to do is go around and tell everybody, I'm lowering your taxes, and I'm lowering your rent.
And her being able to say that, some self-validation is going to cost these communities tens of millions of dollars.
Incredible.
Let's take a break.
1420 WBSM, New Bedford's news talk station.
Turnover in...
Take South Coast Tonight with you wherever you go. Stream Chris and Marcus on the WBSM app or get their podcast on the app at WBSM.com. Now, back to South Coast Tonight.
So, welcome back. We're just... So, we have Zach Boyer says he intends to run for Ward 5 City Council.
Because Scott Lima is not running for re-election.
Scott Lima is not running for re-election. We know that Councilor Lopes lives in Ward 5 now. Former Councilor Lopes lives in Ward 5 now. Maybe he runs.
Former Councilor Jane Gonzalez has never gotten out of politics. She's been around. Her mother passed away, which I know was a big part of her responsibilities in life. So that gives her, unfortunately, a little freer hand. She's been active at the city as the trustee of the ARPA funds at the county commission level.
Yeah.
There's a number of people, Marcus, in that ward.
Maybe Mayor Mitchell runs.
Maybe Mitchell. He's former Mayor Lang.
Mitchell runs. You'll have both seats. I was wondering, does Mitchell call he's a constituent? Does he call Scott for stuff?
No, he calls Ian because Ian gets it done. Let me see. Who else is in that ward? A lot of people.
I do want to say, actually, when I remember when that race was open, one of my buddies who lives in Ward 5 and has for a long time, I was talking to him about the race. I'm like, oh, Paul Chase looks good, so and so looks good. He goes, Scott Lima's going to win that race. I'm like, what? He goes, it's his time. He's going to win that race. And he did.
Scott really rolled up some big margins.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He did a great job, and I think the council will definitely miss his leadership on a lot of issues.
Look, and as a final tip of the hat to his decency, as he leaves the door, he's doing it with plenty of time.
Yes,
to give a lot of people an opportunity to run.
Absolutely,
he's not pulling a sneak move where he leaves at the last minute. Any of that stuff.
Are we gonna take a break?
The WBSM app is
WBSM.com to check out our breaking story that Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima will not seek re-election. We've got our friend Terry from Fairhaven Animal Control. He's going to be